And at the northwestern corner of George Winfrey's cornfield, you look southeastward across the field. This is one of the few kind of landmarks for events that took place in this part of the battlefield. But for the vast majority of the men of John Croxton's brigade that we're going to be talking about, they had no idea that this field was here. They moved eastward through the woods to the north of the field. Maybe some of the men on the right of the 74th Indiana, some of their skirmishers, they might have been out far enough to be able to see the field. But the field does become a factor in this story, because when the 1st Confederate Infantry becomes engaged in the battle against Croxton's brigade, that brigade, Claudius Wilson's Georgia Brigade, they are moving from essentially south to north, and their left, the left end of their brigade line, extended in just barely into the eastern edge of the field. I tell you this, and in just a minute I'm going to walk you into the woods, and while we're not going to walk you truly in any circles, you are going to make some bends and the like, and pretty soon you won't be able to see this field, and you may be confused as to exactly which direction you face also. And I'll say, good, because you're having the same feeling and sensation the majority of the people on this battlefield had. Keeping track of orientation was very difficult. You won't be able to see the field. But try to remember as we tell this story that when Wilson's Georgia Infantry becomes engaged, they are moving essentially from south to north in the woods, mostly to the east of the field, but the left end of their line extends out into this field. And it'll be probably a little hard. I've got some maps that'll help a little bit. Might be a little hard to fully understand and appreciate this, but if you remember this picture of the field and try to imagine a Confederate line moving through those woods over there and the left of their line in the field, it might help you understand it a little bit better.
Is the field its historic size?
Almost. We are now standing at the northwest corner. The field had gotten too large, and so about 25 years ago, we started yet another drought in the southeast by making the decision to plant trees in this part of the field to get it growing back to its proper size. And so now, by a combination of things, this part of the field is starting to grow up. We were able to tell the proper size of the field by a number of things: historic maps of the time, maps done by the Park Commission once the battlefield park is created, and since there had been changes to the landscape between 1863 and the creation of the battlefield park, the Park Commission marked the corners of the historic fields with small stones. And fortunately, at the time that we made the decision to reshape this field, all 4 of the field cornerstones were still standing, including the one right here. Which on brick stood until 7 or 8 years ago, when in a storm, the top of one of these trees came down, and in maintenance cleaning it up, they broke the stone off. And they said, no, there was never any stone there. Yeah, I'll show you your picture that you took of what needed to be cleaned up, and you can see the stone sticking out of what needs to be cleaned up. And so the guy who was in charge of it was sent to find the stone, and he just found any stone and stuck it here. So one of the things I'd like to do before I leave here is now come out here after the ground gets soft again and actually probe around and find the broken off part that's still down the ground and get it replaced. But if we went to the other three corners, they're still there, or they at least were last winter. So
never know, do you?
That's right. So, okay, so now we're going to walk into the woods. Yeah.
Are all the monuments we can see from here from later in the day?
Yes, the monuments that you are seeing right now are all from later in the day. You know, as kind of as the monuments go relative to the story we're telling right now, all these first ones that we're going to be seeing, just forget about them. We're going to walk to the first of the monuments that are really applicable to our story over the next few minutes. They only put the monuments up right before those troops became engaged at that place, so those troops would know where to put where to be engaged. So, you know, when Croxton came out early in the morning, this one wasn't here yet, but they quickly put it in, so when the first Ohio came on later, then they would know where they would be. So,
Got it.
that's one of the jokes about the monuments here. So the monuments were here at the time so that the soldiers knew where they'd have to fight. From basically all of those. I don't pay much attention to the weather, so I didn't think to throw my pop-up tent in the back of the truck this morning when I left the house. And these maps, they're not anything in particular I really want to protect. I can replace them relatively easily, but they'll get wet real quickly, and I won't even get through what I'm going to use them for in this program if I don't protect them a little bit. But this map shows the overall area of operation as it was on the afternoon of September the 18th. Chattanooga's here near the top of the map. Lee and Gordon's Mill is right here. The Chickamauga battlefield, as we know it, is right here in this area. And one of the most critical things about this whole story in the days leading up to and including the battle is that William Stark Rosecrans basically anticipated what it was that Braxton Bragg was going to try to do on September the 18th, 19th, and 20th. One of the most important things that a military leader must do, is literally think about what the enemy might be trying to do. In fact, in the modern military, there's even a little acronym, METTC. M for mission, E for enemy, T for time, T for terrain, T for troops, C for civil or civic impacts. And Rosecrans, a couple of days earlier, having established his headquarters at the Gordon home at Crawfish Springs, began to say that while Bragg has missed opportunities to strike me while I am widely scattered in McLemore's Cove and near Lee and Gordon's Mill, as I get my army back together again, Bragg still has a chance to potentially make it difficult for me by marching his army up from the south and getting in between me as I come out of the mountains southwest of Chattanooga and move up to only lightly garrisoned Chattanooga. And so when Bragg indeed on September the 18th began to try to execute that exact strategy or plan, William Stark Rosecrans had already anticipated it. And even though he had not been able to position sufficient troops to block that move by the Confederates, he had Gordon Granger's Reserve Corps element, Minty's cavalry, Wilder's brigade, positioned to at least detect that movement on the 18th. And as it became clear during the course of the action on the 18th, as Minty was pushed back and across the creek at Reed's Bridge, and Wilder encountered Confederates at Alexander's Bridge, it became clear to Rosecrans that Bragg was indeed trying to get in between him as he comes out of the mountains and the city of Chattanooga to the north. And that afternoon, Rosecrans reacted by ordering George Thomas's 14th Corps, which had already marched some distance that day to positions south of Crawfish Springs. He ordered the 14th Corps, Negley, Baird's, Brannan's divisions in particular, to get back on the road and start marching northward to extend the Union left flank further to the north. And this, of course, becomes the famous night march for the Army of the Cumberland, and particularly the 14th Corps troops. A very trying march. They move across the rear of Crittenden's 21st Corps. They find the roads clogged because this is a last-minute order. There has not been proper route planning. There are lots of Crittenden's trains in the roads. Some of Crittenden's men are moving also. And so this is one of the marches the infantry hates, where where you might march 100 yards and stand 10 minutes, march half a mile and stand 30 minutes, march 2 steps and stand 5 minutes, march 2 steps more and stand 5 minutes more. If you're an infantry guy and you know you've got to make a march, and you know that it's not likely you're going to have any wheeled vehicle transportation to take you on that march, if you got to make the march, you want to get it over with. You don't want to have to be standing for long times. But overnight, Thomas's men will march across the rear of Crittenden's Corps. And now, as I turn this map to late afternoon, you can see Thomas's men beginning to move. Baird's, Brannan's, Reynolds' divisions, led by Negley, until he is turned off at Glass's Mill to block that crossing of West Chickamauga Creek. And they will, through the late hours of the 18th and the early morning hours of the 19th, will move up and come out on the Lafayette Road at the Kelly Farm. Baird's division is in the lead at that time, and when Baird's men reach the Lafayette Road at the Kelly Farm, they are deployed astride the Lafayette Road, facing south, facing down towards Wilder at the Vineyard Farm and the Alexander Vineyard Road area, facing south towards Crittenden at Lee and Gordon's Mill. The next division to arrive is John Brannan's division. They march across the rear of Baird, and they deploy in the north end of Kelly Field. Having now marched all night long, what do these soldiers of Baird's and Brannan's division want to do?
Eat and sleep.
Eat and sleep. And even before they eat anything or go to bed, they want a cup of coffee. And, yep, they're as addicted to coffee then as we are today. And maybe even more so, because they thought it was medicinal. It's not. All of a sudden in Kelly Field, hundreds of little fires are kindled, and men begin to squat around them, boiling their hobo cups of coffee. But for those who were attentive, they might have noticed a small brigade command group ride up to George Thomas. It was Dan McCook, whose men had spent the night of the 18th and the early morning hours of the 19th on the Reedsbridge Road corridor out near Jay's Mill. And as a result of that, they had gained the impression that there was a lone Confederate brigade, right to be captured. And as McCook marched out that morning under orders from Granger to go back to Rossville Gap, McCook saw Thomas's men beginning to arrive in Kelly Field and reported to George Thomas that there is a lone Confederate brigade out near Jay's Mill and Reed's Bridge, and I, Dan McCook, have burned Reed's Bridge. That brigade is trapped and can be captured. And George Thomas, knowing that Rosecrans wants to get back on the offensive, even though he's marched all night long and his men are now only boiling their coffee, George Thomas decides to try to capture that lone brigade. And he orders John Brannan's division to form up and march eastward. Brannan has 3 brigades. Ferdinand Vanderveer's brigade is deployed astride the Reed's Bridge Road and marches eastward on the Reed's Bridge Road corridor. And many of you all know that about a mile to the east of the Lafayette Road, the Reed's Bridge Road goes from running true east and west, and it turns southeastward. And Vanderveer's men will make that turn as well. John Croxton's brigade will be, Vanderveer is essentially the left front of Brannan's division. Croxton's brigade will be the left front of the division, and he begins marching due east from the Kelly Field. Now, sometime I would love to be able to emulate that as a tour or a program for folks. We'd need to do it in the wintertime after the vegetation is off. We'd have to break through some big privet stands at some points, but you can indeed do that, and there are, some of you all know, some small commemorative features there and the south end of the Kelly Field, which say the route of Croxton's brigade to the opening of the battle. And basically, if you go due east from them through the woods, you will get to where we are going now ourselves. And even though we will not be able to walk a trail that will take us due east on the actual axis of their advance, which is a little bit to the north of where we are going eastward now, kind of emulating that move of Croxton's brigade. So think about yourself being some of those men who have marched all night long. You're probably pretty angry that your cup of coffee was only partially boiled when you were told to fall in, form up, and march out. Many of those men had tried to save their cup of coffee, drink it partially boiled. Of course, it was very hot at the time. Others tried to carry their cup along with them. I can only imagine how well that worked, stumbling through the woods in formation. Others tried to pour it into their canteens, but they moved now eastward through the woods, going out to try to capture this one lone brigade. Questions or observations? All right, Keith and Ralph, thank you very much for helping to make my maps last just a little bit longer. Once I get them picked up again. Watch out for some stump holes along this trail. App on your phone. A couple of you might have an old-fashioned compass. But we have now moved out to the east of where we were. We've had to do a little zigzagging, and we now stand here with two of the monuments to units of Croxton's brigade in this initial engagement. We walk past the monument to the 74th Indiana there. Here's the monument to the 10th Indiana. John Croxton's mixed brigade of Indiana, Kentucky, and Ohio troops is a large one. It is 5 regiments of infantry and a battery, instead of the Army of the Cumberland standard of 4 regiments of infantry and a battery. Also, some of these units have not seen a great deal of combat, and they are still larger in size than the average Army of the Cumberland infantry unit, which is about 350 in the summer of 1863. These units, 400, 425, 450. In fact, with the artillery, this brigade's strength is just over 2,300. They are a larger infantry brigade than the typical one here at 1,500. Now, some of the accounts from the brigade indicate that when they first marched out from the Kelly Field, they did so along a road. There were a series of farm lanes through the woods that connected various farmsteads on the battlefield. and it is possible that for at least a short distance, the men marched in what we would think of as column of four, what they called march by the flank on those roads. But after going just a short distance, knowing that they were going out to make contact with a Confederate unit, they then will deploy. The Army of the Cumberland is using Casey's Tactics, a new tactical manual, to replace Hardee's and Scott's earlier tactics that the United States Army had used. And in Casey's Tactics, a brigade was formed with half of its regiments in a front line, and the other half in a second line. But of course, with 5 regiments, you can't be exactly half and half. And so Croxton, the colonel of the 4th Kentucky, the senior colonel in the brigade, and hence the brigade commander, John Croxton, orders the brigade to be formed with 3 regiments in line of battle across the front. On his right front, the 74th Indiana, whose monument we will pass. In the center is the 10th Indiana, and on his left front, his own regiment, the 4th Kentucky. These units, each a little over 400 men strong. That's 1,200 men roughly in that front line. That's a frontage with intervals between the regiments that is approaching even a half a mile across the front. These 2 regiments, here the monuments would need to be a little further separated if you say the monuments are the center of those regiments. The other 2 regiments are in a second line, the 10th Kentucky in his left rear and the 14th Ohio in his right rear. His artillery battery, Battery C, 1st Ohio Light Artillery, is in the center of the brigade, essentially between the 2 lines and in that interval between the 10th Kentucky and 4th Ohio in the second line and behind the 10th Indiana in front. They will deploy skirmishers, 2 companies of the 4th Kentucky and 2 companies of the 74th Indiana are deployed, and the 10th Indiana's Major John Van Netta is ordered to command the skirmish line. And Van Netta will write of that morning, about 6 o'clock, we stopped to get breakfast, and when the coffee commenced to boil, the bugle sounded the assembly, and an orderly came from Colonel Croxton with orders for Major Van Netta to report at his headquarters. He reported, and Croxton said to him, I'm going to give you 2 companies of the 4th Indiana and 2 companies of the 10th Indiana and bring on the engagement. He formed the companies in the skirmish line, told them to drop knapsacks, and we started in and drove the enemy half to 3/4 of a mile. Shortly after beginning to move forward, they do make contact with some Confederates. Early that morning, Pegram's brigade, now under Davidson, has engaged McCook's men around Jay's Mill, and as McCook withdrew back towards Rossville Gap, some of those cavalrymen of Nathan Bedford Forrest Cavalry Command, Pegram's, now Davidson's brigade, some individual Confederates had pursued the withdrawing Federal soldiers. And some of them, in fact, had gone so far east that they were able to fire on Union troops, so far west that they were able to fire on Union troops moving on the Lafayette Road. But it's not organized bodies, it's just very small parties of Confederates, even individuals. And so now as Croxton's men march eastward, they make contact with these scattering Confederates in the woods and begin driving them back. So there is some gunfire. At the same time, to the east of us, around Jay's Mill, Nathan Bedford Forrest is desirous of determining where the Yankees had gone that he had been battling around Jay's Mill. And he orders the 10th Confederate Cavalry to move west into the woods as on a reconnaissance to determine where the Federals who he had engaged around Jay's Mill have disappeared to. And just now at this moment, when you have the skirmishers of Croxton's brigade advancing eastward through the woods, the men of these four companies at 4 paces intervals, probably moving forward in when the skirmishers were deployed, the men counted off 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The entire line could advance, but it also was possible for the commander of the skirmish line, in this case, the 10th Indiana's Major Van Netta, to order the men to move forward alternately. He could have the odd number men move forward, and then the even number men, or even the number 1s, and then the number 2s, then the number 3s. You could leapfrog forward. The idea being that the skirmishers who were stationary could cover those who were advancing under orders. But this skirmish line, Union soldiers, 4 companies, about about 160 men deployed across the front of the brigade, is moving eastward just at the moment that the advance guard of the 10th Confederate Cavalry is coming westward. As the 10th Confederate Cavalry advance guard comes westward, they suddenly see some Union soldiers in the woods. These are the skirmishers of Croxton's brigade. What had they been told they were going to look for? Union soldiers who they'd been battling earlier, who have now disappeared. What do they think they have found? Union troops. Since the last they'd seen of Union troops was them withdrawing, they thought maybe if we just give a little pressure, they will disappear as well. And that advance guard of the 10th Confederate Cavalry begins to whoop and holler and give the rebel yell. They put spurs to their horses, and they pick up speed through the trees to close on those Union skirmishers. Van Netta realizes he's run into more than he can handle at that particular moment, and he orders his skirmishers to come back on the run. As he goes on and says, we started in and drove the enemy 1/2 to 3/4 of a mile. Opened fire on Forrest cavalry. They galloped away and came back with a force of cavalry and started after us. We fell back without firing and halting within 200 yards of the brigade line. Another member of the 10th Indiana will say, after advancing but a short distance in line of battle, the skirmishers came in contact with the enemy's pickets. When the firing commenced, at first a few scattering shots, then faster and faster until our entire skirmish line seemed to be engaged. It was very evident that the enemy's pickets were not idle, for many of their bullets passed over our heads. This state of affairs continued perhaps 15 or 20 minutes, the line of battle coming to a halt in the meantime. All at once, we heard the rebel yell right in our front, which showed us too plainly that there was to be something more than picket firing. Soon our skirmishers were coming back on the run, pursued by a regiment of cavalry. It was none of your 220 country fair concerns. The boys on the skirmish line never knew before that time how fast they could run. The enemy's cavalry was close second with drawn sabers and urging their horses to the utmost speed, and all the time yelling like demons. We didn't dare fire, as we would in all probability have killed more of our own men than of the enemy. On they came till our skirmishers passed through our line of battle. The enemy seemed not to have noticed our line in their mad pursuit, but came dashing up to within a short distance of us. One member of the brigade suggests that at least his regiment had been laid down in the woods, which was entirely a possibility. By this time of the war, officers were learning to protect their soldiers as much as possible, and you could do that by laying your line of battle down, literally opening the interval between the front and rear ranks, and then commanding the men to lie down. This probably helps account for why the Confederate cavalry, now chasing these Union soldiers who have turned and are now running away to the west, why the Confederate cavalry did not suddenly see a Union line of battle, 3 regiments, 1,200 men strong, in the woods. And as one of those Indiana soldiers, Peter Kellenberger, says, very soon our skirmishers came back on the run, and a troop of rebel cavalry came rushing over the hill close onto our skirmishers. "Steady, boys, wait for the word," was heard from our colonel. On came the cavalry. The advance had raced 150 yards without seeing us. One tremendous volley rang along the whole line. At first all was smoke, then dust from struggling steeds. A few riderless horses were running here and there, save which nothing was seen of that cavalry troops. I have read of cavalry charges and seen them in print, but this was the first reality of the kind I had witnessed, and truly it was a grand sight. Deserters told us not one of that squad returned fighting. That volley by those 1,200 Indiana and Kentucky soldiers will cause some devastation amongst the advance guard of the 10th Confederate Cavalry. They will turn and go back. Some of them come out of the woods at the Jay's Mill Field and tell other Confederate cavalrymen there, "Get, boys, the woods is full of Yanks." Forrest was undaunted, and he orders his men to, the more of the cavalry that is there, to dismount. The initial skirmish line, having now, Croxton's brigade having now been a little disordered by this withdrawal, other troops are ordered on the skirmish line, including Company A of the 10th Indiana. And as this one soldier goes on to say, as they advanced forward with the skirmish line, quite a number of dead men and many dead and crippled horses was the result of that volley. They advanced through the area where the advance guard of the 10th Confederate has been shocked, and after an advance of about 200 yards, when they came in contact with the enemy skirmishers, the firing commenced pretty much as at first, but no cavalry this time. Instead, they run out a section of a battery and about 2 guns about 100 yards in our front, which began to shell us. They did little harm as their range was bad, the shells passing considerable distance over our head. The boys made it hot for their gunners, and for a little while, as they drew the fire from the entire skirmish line, we soon discovered the enemy's infantry was making an advance. As the Union skirmish line goes back out in front of Croxton's main line, Forrest has ordered Pegram to order Davidson to dismount the rest of his brigade and to deploy it into the woods. And some of you all know that if you go down the trail here and then on another one that goes out to the east, just a short distance straight through the woods here, about 150 yards, you'll come to the monuments erected by the state of Georgia to the 10th Confederate Cavalry, 1st Georgia Cavalry, and the 6th Georgia Cavalry. And out to the east of where we are, now a skirmish fight grows between Pegram's dismounted men and the skirmish line of Croxton's brigade. Forrest has quickly learned that there is some sizable Union force in this area, infantry, and that he needs infantry support, and he will go south and get get Wilson's brigade, and when they march up from the south, moving literally, as most units will on September the 19th, to the sound of the guns in the woods, they come up from the south or the south-southeast, moving towards the sound of this skirmish fight going on the front line here. And that's going to bring the next phase of the battle. This is the opening action of the heavy action on September the 19th. And one of the things that you can raise as a valid question is, what had George Thomas told John Brannan, and what had John Brannan told John Croxton and Ferdinand Vanderveer? They are to capture a lone brigade. But after having repulsed the advance guard of the 10th Confederate Cavalry, other than advancing the skirmish line again, what has Croxton done to resume the forward movement? Nothing. And with a large brigade still initially deployed, 3 regiments across the front and 2 others in the second line to the rear, you can ask the question, might he ought to have been more aggressive that morning? Thomas's intent is clearly offensive in nature. The order that Croxton got was the same, but Croxton now seems to be satisfied with some sort of a skirmish fight here. As a result, there is no more further eastward Federal movement from this point, and that allows time for Forrest to first send off all of his staff and then himself to go down and get from Bragg and William Henry Talbot Shot Pouch Walker Wilson's Georgia Brigade. This action between Croxton's men and the 10th Confederate Cavalry is about 7:30. Wilson's Georgia Brigade is going to become engaged about 8:30. There's about an hour's time in there, which is the time that Forrest was allowed and was needed to bring that 1st Confederate infantry in. Now, Wilson's Georgia Brigade, when they advance towards the sound of the guns, they are coming up from the south, literally moving to the sound of this skirmish fight that's going on here. They deploy in line of battle on the Youngblood Farm, which was along Jay's Mill Road, south of Jay's Mill, on the top of the rise. If you drive along Jay's Mill Road between Jay's Mill and Brotherton Road and Alexander Bridge Road, the road goes up over the top of a rise and then down again. The large Youngblood Farm was on the top of that rise. Wilson's men deploy there in line of battle, and their line of battle extended far enough to the west that the left of the line was where? In Winfrey Field, that we saw a minute ago. Now, most of you, or many of you all, are probably kind of turned around now about exactly where we are. Winfrey Field is in that direction. And Wilson's men are coming up. Some of you also know that if you go through the woods here, you will find the markers erected by the state of Georgia for the Georgia units in Wilson's brigade, and they extend across the Brotherton Road down here near where Bragg's headquarters on September the 20th is located. But those markers indicate the approach of Wilson's brigade, and they are at nearly right angles to this line of battle of Croxton's brigade. And now Croxton is going to have to begin to respond to this new threat. Questions or observations at this point? Mr. Grant?
After Walker's force crossed at Madison Ford, where do they bivouac?
Walker's men will cross at Byram's or Lambert's Ford beginning late on September the 18th, and and they're going to basically wind up bivouacking just right along the road that leads from Byram's or Lambert's Ford, and then up, and it comes in right essentially where the intersection of Alexander Vineyard and Alexander Bridge Road are today. And some of them have gotten even a little bit to the west of Alexander Bridge Road before they bivouac. The next morning, they begin moving slowly further to the west as well to close up on the other Confederates who have spent the night astride Alexander Vineyard Road in the area of the intersection leading down to Thetford and Dalton's Ford. So Walker's men are kind of stretched out along that whole road overnight. And in fact, Wilson's brigade is the last of the infantry to cross, and Wilson had to, he was tasked with assisting the wagons of the Reserve Corps across Byram's or Lambert's Ford, which turns out to be a very difficult ford, a rocky ford. In fact, one of his regiments has only just rejoined him when he starts north on the morning of the 19th. So they're kind of coming from the area of the intersection of Alexander Bridge and Alexander Vineyard Road, or Alexander Bridge and Jays Mill Road area, kind of in that area. So if sometime we can look at a more detailed map and you'll see that road network a little better.
They're the first brigade that Forrest finds, so that's why they're the ones.
That's right. They're the closest force. Although Forrest himself, to get infantry, he has had to go further west. He's had to go onto the Alexander Vineyard Road corridor somewhere where he encountered Braxton Bragg talking to William Henry Talbot Shot Pouch Walker, the Reserve Corps commander. Bragg telling Walker to mass his corps and hold himself in readiness to support the resumption of the attack of the day before on Lee and Gordon's Mill. I said that Rosecrans did proper in anticipating what Bragg might do. Bragg did not do proper because Bragg did not say, on September the 18th, it took me all day to do what I wanted to do by late morning. So how might Rosecrans react? Bragg should have figured that Rosecrans would react by trying to protect his left flank. Bragg, on the morning of the 19th, still thought the Union left flank would be at Lee and Gordon's Mill. And Bragg is telling Hood and Bushrod Johnson and Walker that they are to, and Buckner, who's joined them as well, that they are to hold themselves in readiness to advance and attack the Union left flank at Lee and Gordon's Mill. And at that moment, as Bragg is communicating that to Walker, Forrest rides up and says, I need infantry. And he's given the closest brigade, which is Wilson's. And then a few minutes later, Forrest will take Ector's brigade without asking anybody. He'll just take Ector's brigade.
And they're both at Gist Division, but Gist isn't on the field.
That's correct. They and to make it even more complicated, technically that is William Henry Talbot Shot Pouch Walker's division in Mississippi, but because Walker was a fiery Southern nationalist and a West Point classmate of Braxton Bragg, and a Major General, Bragg has promoted him to Reserve Corps Command, and so now the senior brigade commander in Walker's division, State Rights Gist, becomes the division commander, but Gist is not here because his brigade has been sent to Rome, and it's on its way back back here. So yeah, again, you need a big thick book to keep track of the organizational changes within the Army of Tennessee.
And he sends Ector to engage Vanderveer, basically.
It's not real clear that Forrest fully understood that Vanderveer was up there on the Reedsbridge Road. Where he's really sending Ector, he's put Wilson in on the left of his cavalry line, and he's putting Ector in on the right of his cavalry line. And as they go further west up the corridor of Reed's Bridge Road, they then fully encounter Vanderveer's brigade up there.
So that's what happens, but Forrest didn't necessarily.
Right. Forrest probably did not fully understand that there was a brigade-size infantry element up on the road, in part because what is Forrest doing himself in this action after he rides back with Wilson's brigade? He's along this firing line over here. When Huwald's battery gets into a little bit of trouble, it's Forrest in his linen duster that extracts Huwald's battery from that position. So he loses sight of the bigger picture and probably never fully appreciated that Vanderveer represents the true left end of the Union Army. After, say, 7:30 on the morning of September the 19th.
As the Confederates are coming up, is there anyone hitting their left flank or Wilder?
No, not at this time, because the closest Federals are going to be Baird's division back at Kelly Field astride the Lafayette Road, although now that this sound, the battle out here has erupted, Baird reorients to face to the east, but he's just barely this side of the Lafayette Road at the south end of Kelly Field. Wilder, under orders from Rosecrans, received before dawn. Wilder has at dawn withdrawn from east of the Lafayette Road to the western edge of the Vineyard Farm. And so he actually has put a little greater distance between himself. And then you've got Gross's brigade of Palmer's division, which is going to make a reconnaissance up the Lafayette Road from the Lee and Gordon's Mill area. Somehow Crittenden missed the fact that overnight the 14th Corps marched across the rear of his corps. This is not the only thing Crittenden misses in the campaign. But Crittenden, by the morning of the 19th, is curious what all this sound was across the rear of his corps overnight, and he's getting some word that there are now Federals astride the road further to the north, so he orders John Palmer to conduct a reconnaissance up the Lafayette Road, and Palmer sends Gross's brigade up the Lafayette Road. They get to the Brotherton Farm. Their advance makes contact with Baird's people in the south end of Kelly Field. Gross reports to Palmer, who reports to Crittenden that Thomas is now on the Lafayette Road at the Kelly Field. Gross actually deployed his brigade astride the Brotherton Road and advanced it eastward, the skirmish line, all the way to the Brock Field, when Palmer and Crittenden recall him. And this is associated with the Baird division fight a little bit later on in the morning, where Baird is told when he comes out to support Brannan that his right flank would be protected by John Palmer. What they're referring to is Gross's brigade then astride the Brotherton Road. But Gross gets recalled and marches back down to Lee and Gordon's Mills. So again, this is there's a lot more movement to all of this than even the 116 maps in Dave Powell's very useful maps of Chickamauga can suggest. So, we'd need 1,016 maps to begin to start to really kind of put all of that movement in position. So, if I hit the lottery, I've got to play it first, but if I hit the lottery, I'm going to complete my experiment of building a small nuclear generating plant that I can put in my old blue wagon from being a kid, so I can then plug in a 60-inch flat screen monitor out here, even on a bright sunny day, and have enough power that you all would be able to see it in the bright sunlight. And then I'll have some elaborate computer maps generated that have all of this movement on it that you can zoom in and zoom out and see these big pictures, because there is movement going on all of the time. It is the 19th of September is just unbelievably fluid. So, somehow take Dave's maps and make photocopies of them and kind of lay them out by time period and area of the battlefield, and then just try to think somehow that that most of what's on those maps are in motion at any given moment. So,
two questions. The meeting between Forrest and Bragg, that would have taken place on this side of the Chickamauga Creek.
correct.
And then, is it about what time does the regular brigade get up here? Is that around
Well,
10 or so?
the regular brigade is part of Baird's division, and as a result of this growing fight, George Thomas is going to order Baird's division to come out in support of Brannan's division, and that's going to be after 10 o'clock. It'll when they really start to make contact with some Confederates.
And this is about 7:30, right?
This starts about 7:30. We now are 8:30, 8:45, 9 o'clock. Wilson is engaging now. So. All righty.
What time of day would the fighting up at Ringdale Bridge be going on?
Well, that's going to be mostly in the afternoon of the 19th. That happens there that day. So. Okay.
Who all reported to Forrest?
I'm sorry.
Who all reported to Forrest?
Forrest has by this time he has two divisions. He has his own division is now under Frank Armstrong. These are the troops that he had in Middle Tennessee in the spring of 1863, and with the retreat of Bragg in early July across the Tennessee River, he has been given control on September the 3rd of the mounted force of the Department of East Tennessee, Buckner's command. And this is the impromptu division of John Pegram. But Pegram does not get along with the another one of the brigade commanders, John Scott, and so rarely did Pegram's division ever function as a division. There's also another brigade in that division, which is one of the forgotten brigades of the campaign for Chattanooga. It is George Hodges' Kentucky and Virginia Brigade of Cavalry. So with Pegram acting as division commander, he needs a brigade commander. Henry Davidson has been ordered to that, and actually Davidson arrived on the morning of the 19th, just as all of this begins. And so technically, Forrest has two divisions, Armstrong and Pegram, Armstrong has two brigades, Debrell and Wheeler, and Pegram has three brigades, Davidson, Scott, and Hodge. But Hodge's brigade is up they're going to be pushed south of Cleveland on September the 19th as the advanced cavalry force of Burnside's command comes south of the Hiwassee River and occupies Cleveland on September the 19th, actually spends the night in Cleveland on the night of the 19th before going back to the Hiwassee on the 20th. Okay. All right, so now Confederate infantry is coming up, and Croxton has to react. To this Confederate presence is that he orders the two regiments in his second line, on the left rear, the 10th Kentucky, and on the right rear, the 14th Ohio, to deploy forward on the line. And for a short time, he has all five of his infantry regiments on that line of battle facing to the east. 10th Kentucky, 4th Kentucky, 10th Indiana, 74th Indiana, 14th Ohio. But as Wilson's men begin to come up from the southeast, or the southwest, the southeast, south, or south-southwest, from that direction, Croxton realizes that he must turn to face this new threat. And he begins to reorient his regiment. And we are standing now by the marker to the 10th Ohio. And a couple of you all can see that the front is here. This marker faces south, or just a little bit east of south. And it reflects now this reorientation of Croxton's brigade to face now Wilson's brigade as they come up from the south. Initially, he deploys a couple of the regiments on the right of the brigade to face south, but as it became clear that Wilson's brigade, which is only about 1,300 strong, considerably smaller than Croxton's, which again, if the left of the brigade goes through the Winfrey field over there, and any one of the Georgia markers over here is halfway right for the position of the regiments, and based on some other accounts, there are some big intervals between the regiments of that Georgia brigade. In fact, they had been deployed on the Youngblood farm that way. The 4 guns of Howe's Georgia battery were put in the space between a couple of the regiments. So Wilson, even though he's relatively small, is actually on a pretty broad front, which in the limited visibility forested environment, being able to see no more than 200 yards, and then that visibility diminished by the smoke of battle, Croxton probably thought that that Confederate infantry force was a lot larger than it actually was. He begins to turn not just the right regiments of his line, but all of the regiments of his line. And even though Wilson is outnumbered by Croxton, Wilson, under the cover of the forest, is able to keep enough pressure on Croxton that Croxton's men are going to be forced to withdraw. And Croxton begins to withdraw to the north-northwest in that direction under the pressure of Wilson coming up and the presence still of Confederate cavalry on what is now his left flank. And so by the positioning, you can see the 10th Indiana marker or monument there. 74th Indiana monument is just down here. You can kind of see how Croxton's line now has been turned back at a 90-degree angle, essentially, from his initial line to now a new line facing south, basically, in the face of Wilson's approaching brigades. Questions or observations? All right. So now I won't have you march in retreat like they probably did, but now we will we'll begin to emulate Croxton's withdrawal in face of Wilson's advance. And coming along with Wilson's advance are the 4 guns of Howe's Georgia battery. There's no account from Howe's battery, so we don't know whether the battery stayed in the intervals between the regiments or whether they were massed at one point or another. But if they are massed, or at least one section of it, they're towards the left end of Wilson's line. Really proud of having the nation's first national military park, symbol of reconciliation and reunification. And so they knew lots of people would be coming. Rail companies all over the country modify their schedules so to facilitate the special trains bringing people to Chattanooga for the dedication day on September 19, 1895. And so they knew lots of people were going to be coming. So they built a tent city along Broad Street south of Chattanooga, down close to Chattanooga Creek. And it filled up. And the mayor of Chattanooga issued a call to the citizens. Throw open your doors and simply let people sleep on the floors of your hallways and living rooms and other places in your house. There were people, if you lived here locally, Dr. Richard Hanks, who's a retired physician from the Rome area, there's a family story, a detailed family story in his family about how his 6th Georgia Cavalry Chickamauga campaign veteran loaded his family up in the wagon, and they spent several days coming by from Rome by wagon up here and camped for about a week on the Chickamauga battlefield to be able to attend the dedication. So it was a big thing nationally. So,
There are a lot of locals from Lafayette.
I suspect, I can't. Well, we know that we know the names of at least a few because they were on some of the committees that helped put it on, so they undoubtedly attended. But I suspect Lafayette was probably a ghost town on September the 19th. Lots of people came up to be at the dedication. So. Okay, I pause here for just a minute. We've got to actually jog a little bit to the west now. We've kind of been emulating Croxton's withdrawal in the face of Wilson's pressure from the south, and so now we're going to kind of walk across the front of Croxton's brigade. So imagine other parts of Croxton's band just simply moving through the woods, and they're going to join us where we stop over here in just a minute. At the 10th and 74th Indiana Monument, another tablet, which was the Croxton tablet, for its first position. This is the second position. Croxton is now pushed northward by the approach of Wilson's brigade, and he's pushed back into this area when, fortunately, some assistance, relief, arrives. And that is in the form of Absalom Baird's division. The division that had led the Union column into Kelly Field early that morning, and then had been deployed astride the Lafayette Road, the south end of the Kelly Field initially. And when Brannan was sent out to the east from the Kelly Field, Baird had redeployed his division so that it faced more eastward. And now, as this fight has grown in size out here, George Thomas himself, having ridden out here and in consultation with John Brannan and others, including John Croxton, who is now wondering where this one lone Confederate brigade is supposed to be, Thomas has realized that Brannan's division is likely to need assistance. And Absalom Baird's division of 3 brigades is ordered to march out to the east. And they come out from the south end of the Kelly Field, moving due east through the woods, deployed 2 brigades up and 1 brigade back. Now, ideally, that Casey's Tactics division formation would have been maintained with proper intervals, except what type of terrain are they moving through? Wooded. And as a result, it is difficult to maintain that proper formation, and as a result, the left front brigade of Baird's division, John King's regular brigade, is actually going to pass right through the area where we are now and just a little bit to the north of us, kind of passing into the rear of Croxton's brigade. The right front brigade of Baird's division, Scribner's brigade, will come this way, and Scribner, as he comes eastward, what does he encounter in the flank? The left of Wilson's brigade. The amount of contact Scribner makes with Wilson is not that great. It's not a major engagement or the like. Wilson has now been engaged for an hour and a half or so. He is taking some casualties, and as much as anything, what Croxton encounters of Wilson is not really the main battle line of Wilson's brigade, But since Wilson has come on the battlefield from south to north, how are the wounded of Wilson's brigade moving as they move back to wherever the brigade field hospital has been established? They're moving simply backwards on the route that they have come onto the field. And so walking wounded men of Wilson's brigade and litter bearers and parties of medical teams, assistant surgeons, hospital stewards, and since Wilson is capturing some of Croxton's men, there are parties of captured Union soldiers being carried to the rear, and almost literally as Scribner comes out, he advances into the western edge of this stream of Confederates going to the rear. Of course, there are also some skulkers and men who have dropped out of the ranks. Some of them put up a little bit of resistance, and they also report to Wilson, and this is what will cause Wilson to halt his forward advance and withdraw back to the south and also to the southeast from that position. But the arrival of Scribner's brigade on Wilson's left is what's going to relieve the pressure on Croxton. And with King's brigade moving into this area, Scribner there, some of Croxton's men even have some contact with Starkweather's brigade. Croxton is able to disengage from the Confederates and pass to the rear to now resupply. Croxton's men had marched out that morning with the 40 rounds in their cartridge box on their right hip and another 20 rounds carried in their pockets or equipment somewhere on their person. And by this time in the fight, for them, about 2.5 hours, although the main battle line has been engaged for less time, about 1.5 hours, these men have fired off almost all of their 60 rounds of ammunition. And Croxton now is able to withdraw off to the northwest and resupply with ammunition. Wilson is forced to withdraw in that direction. King's brigade has had some contact with Ector's brigade and DeBrell's cavalry over here and relieved the pressure on Vanderveer to the north. And a brief lull, seemingly, settles over this part of the battlefield. But now by this time, by 10 a.m. and just a little bit after, Brannan's entire division has been engaged. His 1st brigade under John Connell has been farmed out to both Vanderveer and Croxton. The 31st Ohio coming in support of Croxton's brigade. It's mentioned on one of these tablets, but
there,
not this.
Third line down.
Third line, okay. Yeah, there it is. Connell's 31st Ohio has been sent to support Croxton. And now Baird's division has been sent out as well. And on the Confederate side, Forrest has engaged both Davidson's brigade and DeBrell's brigade, and Wilson's infantry and Ector's infantry. And other Confederate infantry has been ordered towards the sound of the guns as well. A very different Battle of Chickamauga is now underway. One that is unfolding more than 3 miles north of where Braxton Bragg had won the battle to begin. Questions or observations?
How does, and I can see how does an artillery battery move through this? Are there any?
Well, the woods were much more open at the time. You could see 150 or 200 yards down through the woods. If you get a chance, go over on Battle Line Road to the area of tour stop number 2 where the regular brigade monuments are, and park there and then look through those woods towards Kelly Field. And there, through a number of different means, we have thinned the vegetation to make it much more like what it would have been at the time. And if you can get the vegetation thin to where you can start to see 150, 175, 200 yards down through the woods, then you start to get enough spacing between the trees that with some labor, you can drive these teams of 6 horses and 3 pairs, towing a limber, towing a cannon down through the trees. It was not easy. And periodically, a driver might misjudge a turn and drive either the axle of the limber or the cannon itself against a tree, which might then necessitate the crew members coming up and literally picking up that vehicle, if it's the limber, picking it up and lifting it around the tree, because it's really hard to make a horse back up. You can get it to back up a little bit, but to get it reoriented enough, you might have to disconnect the cannon and maneuver the cannon to then hook it back up again. It was a labor to move the artillery, but they are doing it. And Croxton's Battery C, 1st Ohio Light Artillery, as this fight has grown, they've been withdrawn back here to the edge of a cedar glade where they were positioned. They actually are firing over the top of the heads of Croxton's men. Where they are is up on a little rise, and they're just kind of firing blindly towards the Confederates beyond. So this is not an artillery battle.
So did Croxton actually send his famous message?
Well, that is much harder to judge whether or not Croxton actually sends a message which says, which one of the several brigades am I to capture? While he may never have sent those actual words, the sentiment of there are more Confederates out here than what I was led to believe is indeed something that is communicated by members of that brigade from very early, in some of the reports of the battle. So the actual history of that phrase, there's not any clear evidence that Croxton phrased it exactly that way.
First shows up with Glenn Tucker.
Yeah, that's, I believe it appears in 1 or 2 other late 19th century histories of the battle, but it first really gets any attention when Glenn Tucker uses it in his Chickamauga Bloody Battle in the West in 1961. Okay, we're not going far this time, so actually let me just get through. Notice this limestone formation here. Sorry about that. Anybody know what this is? I probably should have. Okay, it is. It's not the rock, but it is a rock, or some rocks at Chickamauga. But I probably should have set this up a little bit better. Say that again, Jeff.
Is there a battery there?
No. No. A monument.
A larger monument.
Think back to where we were standing a few minutes ago by the 10th Indiana Monument. Think about the rough size of that. I probably should have pointed this out, maybe brought my tape measure along and measured it. At one time, this is where the 10th Indiana thought about erecting their regimental monument. Why did they think about this point? They are going to lose their colonel in this fight. And he fell at this time in the fight as they are pushed back to this position. William B. Carroll, this is a regiment mostly from northwest Indiana, from kind of the greater Lafayette, Indiana area. One of the newspapers of that area has this account. Captain Cressup, the chaplain of the 10th Indiana, who accompanied the remains of Colonel Carroll's remains from the battlefield, related the circumstances of the colonel's death. The regiment was hurried forward, and by marching all night succeeded in reaching the battlefield, when skirmishers were thrown out, who soon became engaged, and with the enemy, and were compelled to fall back for support. On seeing our skirmishers falling back, the rebels pushed forward with redoubled fury, and so rapidly that our skirmishers were compelled to throw themselves upon their faces to avoid the fire of their own regiment. Aided by a Kentucky regiment, the 10th Indiana succeeded in several times forcing the rebels back. It was here, they themselves were then forced back, and it was here that Colonel Carroll received the wound which proved fatal. The fatal ball passed through the right forearm and the body, coming out a little to the right of the backbone. He was borne from the field to a hospital, where he remained but a short time when it became necessary to remove him to a hospital further to the rear. The wound was a very painful one, and he suffered much till a few moments before his death. He breathed his last without any apparent struggle, almost upon the battlefield and within hearing of the hostile cannon, where the true soldier wishes to die. The chaplain spoke with much feeling and alluded with tenderness to the many traits of character which Colonel Carroll possessed. Another man associated with the regiment, W.H. Levering, who was here visiting his brother, an officer in one of the Indiana regiments of Croxton's Brigade, said, Colonel Carroll received a mortal wound during the battle on Saturday, while gallantly leading his regiment in the thickest of the fight. A Minié ball passed through his sword arm near the wrist, and penetrating his right side, came out near his spine. Mr. Levering talked with him while he lay in the ambulance, and subsequently had a conversation with his surgeon, who did not regard the wound as mortal. He probably thought the ball had struck the ribs and glanced around rather than passing through the body. But the hope was delusive, and at 2 o'clock the same day he expired. At least it was understood in camp through Mr. Levering, after a search of 7 hours through the hospitals, they were unable to find Colonel Carroll. But for a time, the veterans of the 10th Indiana considered erecting their regimental monument here on the spot where, or near the spot where Colonel Carroll fell in the fighting on the 19th. There are only a few instances that we know of where a decision was made to erect a monument at one place, and then subsequently it was changed to another place. There are a few notable fights over the position of monuments, but this is one of the ones where we have some physical evidence of that decision to make a change. There once was an initial foundation for the 9th Michigan Monument along Dry Valley Road, but it's now gone. But here you get some sense of what the foundations. This is all locally quarried limestone. The National Military Park providing the foundation, and the states then really only having to provide the monument from the ground or the foundation up. All right. We're going to go to the rear and see if we can replace it out of any. Other tours and just knowledge of the battle, but we have the monument up here to Battery A, 1st Michigan Light Artillery. Over here in the woods, just a short distance, is the marker to the 10th Wisconsin Battery, or excuse me, 10th Wisconsin Infantry. There's the marker to the 33rd Ohio. We're now just in the woods off the northwest corner of the Winfrey Field again. This is the area where Scribner's Brigade, the right front brigade of Baird's division, where they're going to come to grief after that brief lull and with the advent of the next Confederate division, Liddell's division, on the battlefield. Most of these commemorative features for Scribner's Brigade here are oriented relative to their fight with Liddell coming up and across the Winfrey field over here. But if you now reorient them more to the east, then you can see the area that Scribner moves into to then make contact with the left of Wilson to relieve that pressure on Croxton that we talked about a minute ago. So, and you get some sense of that distance, even though we haven't walked a straight line, we've kind of walked zigzag, you get some sense of that distance involved. We'll go out here to the road, make a right-hand turn, and theoretically we'll find our vehicles down there just before